please don't destroy me in the comments for pronouncing the names wrong in this review. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So I know some people feel like this movie didn't need to be made since they already made the Swedish version a few years back, and Noomi Rapace got so much praise for her performance as Elizabeth. But my stance on this second adaptation was that as long as it doesn't suck, it should be fine. And does it suck? No. In fact, it's one of the best films to come out this year. David Fincher does his thing with this. He managed to take a story that's been told twice and made it his own. The movie starts out with Mikael Blomkvist, played by Daniel Craig, who's the head of this magazine, and he wrote this article about this corrupt guy and trying to call him out on his stuff, and basically he slipped up when it came to proof, and he got into a lot of legal trouble for it. So this guy's been studying Mikael and asked him for his help. He needed to find his grandniece. I think it was his grandniece. I'm not 100% sure. It's a really big family. There was this incident on their island like 40 years ago, and it's kind of been eating away at him. And since he has this fatal disease, he wanted it to be settled once and for all. So it's up to Mikael to figure it out, since he really has nothing better to do. His only options were to solve a murder or stay in town and face public persecution. What would you choose? Meanwhile, you have Lisbeth Salander, played wonderfully by Rooney Mara. She's kind of doing her own thing, getting control of her money that's been being kept away from her by the government because of something she did in her past. And she's going through a lot. I don't think I can elaborate more on what she's going through without going into spoiler territory. I'll say this. She's a very interesting character with a lot of depth and goes through a lot in this movie, and it's not always easy to watch. I just wish I picked up more on her vulnerable side before the ending. Also, she has this shirt. But yeah, I think it might have been a whole hour into the movie before Elizabeth and Mikael actually meet each other. The first hour of the movie follows the two characters, neither of them being related. And it was nice how they came together. And once they do work together to solve the mystery of what happened, and once they do get together, they team up to solve the mystery of what happened to Harriet. I like the chemistry of the two leads. At first, Mikael was mad because of the background check Elizabeth did on him and how she got all the information. But once he calmed down, I like their general relationship. Like, Mikael would be sitting there, and Elizabeth would just be doing something, and his reaction would be something like, "Oh, alright, so that's happening. Fine, if that's how you want to play it. Okay. Okay." And Fincher totally does his thing setting the tone for this movie. The guy knows when to be intense. He's willing to give the film a slight comedic touch when the audience needs to laugh, if things don't get too depressing. And he definitely knows how to make the audience cringe and be really uncomfortable. Now, the script did a nice job of giving you the plot and explaining the mystery without it feeling too convoluted. It did lose me a few times, but I was always able to get back on eventually. And the score. Trent Reznor did it again. It manages to be simultaneously subtle and intense. Definitely look into the soundtrack. As much as I like the movie, I did have two gripes. There's a chase scene towards the end, and I'm gonna be honest, it felt a bit off in terms of cinematography. I mean, I know I'm nitpicking here, but for those 2 minutes, it was kind of like watching a cartoon with Elizabeth on her motorcycle like that. It was just the angle they shot her, and it was just like, felt a bit off in comparison to her early motorcycle shots. The second gripe that I have is, after you think the movie is pretty much about to end, there's like another 20 minutes, and I'm assuming this was probably one of the book's flaws. But to be honest, the whole bit just focuses on Miguel's legal troubles from earlier in the movie, which I kind of thought was going to be a backdrop for the later books, but that whole section simultaneously felt tacked on and rushed, because by the end of it, you're like, sure, that was a bit off, but it did mean something clearly in terms of the characters. I guess my issue was how it was paced, and it kind of made me more aware of the movie's length, which is 2 hours plus, though to be honest, I was never bored with it. But overall, this is definitely one of the year's best. What are its Oscar chances? I don't think they're going to give it much attention outside of Rooney's performance and Reznor's score. They're going to want to see what Fincher does with the other two books if he decides to stay on and adapt them. But I do think he at least deserves a nod for his direction in this. He probably won't get it, which is a shame. Like, the guy is honestly one of my favorite directors, and with this movie, he fully delivered again. Also, good job with the opening credits. Like, I was not expecting that. It was literally like watching a Bond film during those opening credits. It was like, wow.